He was just a regular teenager with a guitar and a big dream. For years, he had practiced every single day alone in his room, his fingers moving over the strings like they belonged there. Music was his world, and he wanted to share it with others, to make people feel what he felt when he played. So when he heard about the big talent competition coming to town, he knew this was his chance, the one chance to show everyone what he could do. He didn't tell many people he was going to audition. Mostly, he kept it to himself. His parents knew, of course, and they were proud but worried. They had seen how hard he worked and how much this meant to him. But talent shows were tough. The judges were famous for being harsh, and the audience expected perfection. Still, he told himself he was ready. After all, he had practiced that song 1,000 times. The day of the audition arrived, and he felt a mix of excitement and nerves that twisted in his stomach. He wore his favorite shirt, the one he thought made him look confident. But as he waited backstage watching other people perform, the nerves grew stronger. Some performers sang beautifully, others danced or told jokes, and the crowd clapped loudly. When it was finally his turn, his heart pounded so loudly he thought everyone could hear it. He walked onto the stage, the bright lights blinding him for a moment. The audience was much bigger than he expected, with hundreds of faces staring up at him. He took a deep breath, set his guitar on his knee, and started to play. At first, everything went well. His fingers moved over the strings, playing the notes he had practiced so many times. The melody filled the room, soft and gentle. He closed his eyes for a moment, lost in the music, feeling like he belonged right there on that stage. But then something happened. His fingers slipped. One note sounded off, then another. Suddenly, a string snapped. The sharp, broken sound echoed through the silence. He froze. The crowd gasped. The judges exchanged surprised looks. The moment he had dreamed of turned into a nightmare. He tried to keep playing, but the broken string made it impossible to continue the way he wanted. The melody he had imagined crumbled, replaced by awkward silence and his own shaky hands. He finished the song as best he could, but the magic was gone. As the last note faded, the judges spoke. One judge, known for his blunt words, laughed and said, "Maybe you should stick to playing in your bedroom." Another judge shook his head and said, "You lack the confidence and control to be on this stage." The third judge, who was usually kinder, looked disappointed and simply said, "You need more practice." The audience clapped politely, but it wasn't the kind of applause he had hoped for. The smiles on their faces felt forced. He could see the disbelief in their eyes, like they had expected so much more. It was like everyone had watched his dream break apart right in front of them. Backstage, he felt the tears welling up. His hands trembled and his chest felt heavy. He wanted to disappear. The laughter and the sharp words echoed in his mind, louder than the music he had tried to play. For a moment, he wondered if he should give up. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Maybe he was just fooling himself, but he didn't want to admit defeat yet. Even though his heart hurt, he still loved playing guitar more than anything. He remembered the long nights practicing, the songs he had written, and the feeling of freedom he got from music. He wanted to hold on to that. Unfortunately, it wasn't just the judges who had reacted. After the show aired on TV, clips of his failed audition spread across the internet. People left unkind comments and made fun of him. Some called him names. Others shared the video with mocking captions. The video had millions of views, but most of them weren't kind. It was as if the whole world was laughing at him. He tried not to look at the comments, but it was hard. Everywhere he went, people recognized him and whispered behind his back. At school, some students giggled when he walked by. His friends tried to be supportive, but even they didn't know what to say. The one place he felt safe, music, suddenly felt like a place of shame. He thought about selling his guitar. Maybe it was better to stop playing before he embarrassed himself even more. Maybe he should forget the dream. But deep inside, something refused to give up. There was a small voice telling him to keep going. His grandfather, who had once been a musician, sat with him one afternoon and shared his own story. He told him about times he had failed, about the times people laughed at him too. But what mattered, he said, was what you did after failure. You could let it stop you, or you could let it make you stronger. That afternoon, something changed. The teenager picked up his guitar again. It felt strange at first, like meeting an old friend after a long time apart. His fingers were stiff and his heart still hurt. But as he played, the music started to flow again. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was real. Slowly, he began practicing again, not for anyone else, but for himself. He wrote new songs, ones that told his story and about fear, failure, and hope. He watched videos of great guitarists learning new techniques. He practiced not just the music, but how to stand on stage, how to face an audience without fear. Months passed. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. It was his secret, his quiet fight. Then, one day, he heard that the same talent show was coming back for another season. The thought scared him. He remembered the pain of the last audition. But something inside him whispered, "This time it will be different." He signed up again, quietly, without telling anyone. He knew the judges would remember him, but he didn't care. This time he was ready to show them who he really was. Not just a kid who messed up once, but a musician who refused to quit. After that first painful audition, he disappeared from the spotlight. The teenager stopped posting videos online. He avoided places where people might recognize him. His guitar was tucked away in the corner of his room, gathering dust. At school, he kept his head down, not wanting to be noticed. It felt easier to be invisible. The harsh words of the judges, the laughter from the crowd, and the endless mocking online had worn him down. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. He barely touched his guitar. Music, which had once been his greatest joy, now reminded him of failure. The dream he had carried for so long seemed to be slipping away. At home, his parents noticed. They asked gently if he still wanted to play, but he just shrugged and said he wasn't sure anymore. It was hard to explain the mix of shame, fear, and sadness he felt inside. One afternoon, as he sat alone in his room, his grandfather came to visit. His grandfather was an older man with kind eyes and rough hands that told stories of years spent playing instruments. He had once been a musician himself and knew the pain that came with chasing a dream. Seeing his grandson's sadness, the grandfather sat beside him quietly. He didn't ask many questions at first. Instead, he pulled out an old, worn guitar from the corner of the room and started to play a soft, slow tune. The music filled the room and brought a calm feeling. After a while, the teenager felt something inside him stir. The sound was gentle but powerful. It was like a bridge reaching out to him, reminding him of better days. When the song ended, the grandfather looked at him and said, "I know what you're feeling. I've been there. People laughed at me too. But the important thing is not to stop. Failure is just part of the journey." He told stories of times when his own music career had hit rock bottom, how people told him he wasn't good enough, how he had to play in small bars to survive, and how he felt like giving up. But each time he found a reason to keep going, the love for music and the hope that one day things would be different. Listening to these stories, the teenager felt a small spark of hope. Maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe failure wasn't the end. The grandfather handed him the guitar and said, "Play for me. Play like you mean it, even if it's just for yourself." At first, his fingers were stiff, unsure, but as he played, the music began to flow again. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The notes carried his feelings. Sadness, fear, hope, and determination all mixed together. From that day, he started playing again. Not for judges, not for an audience, but for himself. Each day he spent hours with his guitar. Slowly, the strings stopped feeling foreign under his fingers. The melodies he played became stronger. He wrote new songs, ones that told his own story. Songs about falling down and getting back up. Songs about feeling small in a big world but still believing in something greater. The music helped him heal. Along with playing, he watched videos of other guitarists, musicians who had faced hard times but kept pushing forward. He studied their technique, how they moved on stage, how they connected with their audience. He learned more than just notes. He learned how to be confident. He also worked on his nerves. He practiced standing in front of a mirror, imagining himself on stage. He talked to himself quietly, reminding himself that mistakes were okay and that every musician had tough days. His family saw the change. They noticed how his eyes brightened when he played again. Slowly, the weight on his shoulders lifted. One evening, at a small local event, a few friends and family gathered to watch a few performances. It wasn't a big show, but it felt important. The teenager was nervous but excited. He wanted to test himself. When it was his turn, he stepped on stage quietly. The crowd was small, but their eyes were kind. He played a song he had written, soft at first, then building into something powerful. He made no mistakes. For the first time in a long time, he felt proud. Afterward, people came up to him smiling and clapping. Some said how much they enjoyed the music. Others told him to keep going. It was the encouragement he needed. The memory of that night stayed with him. It was proof that he could face an audience again, that the pain of the past didn't have to control his future. Then one day he heard news that made his heart race. The same talent show was coming back for another season. The very show where he had failed so badly. At first, fear gripped him. The thought of going back to that stage made his stomach twist. What if it happened again? What if the judges laughed again? What if the world saw him fail once more? But deep inside, there was something else. A quiet voice telling him this was his chance to show how much he had grown. That this time, he wasn't the same boy who had stumbled before. He thought about the long hours of practice, the new songs he had written, the confidence he had built. He thought about his grandfather's words and the small open mic night where he had felt hope again. Without telling many people, he signed up for the audition. It was a secret mission, something just for himself. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to try again. He knew the judges might recognize him. He didn't know how they would react, but he decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was ready to face the music, literally and figuratively. In the weeks leading up to the audition, he practiced harder than ever. He worked on every detail of his performance, from the first note to how he would stand and look at the audience. He prepared himself for the moment when all eyes would be on him again. He didn't expect to be perfect. He just wanted to be true to himself. When the day of the audition finally came, he felt calm. The nerves were there, but they didn't control him. He had learned to breathe through them, to let the music guide him. Backstage, he waited quietly, listening to the sounds of other performers. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage with a steady step. The bright lights shone down, but this time he didn't feel blinded. He felt ready. He looked at the judges, their faces serious but curious. He nodded to the audience, then lifted his guitar. The first notes floated through the air, clear, strong, and full of feeling. He played a song he had written about his journey, about failure and hope and never giving up. His fingers moved with precision and passion. There were no mistakes. Every note was perfect. The audience listened, silent and amazed. Even the judges, known for their tough words, sat still, their eyes wide. When the last note rang out, the room was quiet for a moment, then erupted in applause. He smiled, a real smile that came from deep inside. As he walked off the stage, one judge whispered to another, "Is that the same kid from last year?" He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. This time, the music spoke for itself. When he stepped off the stage, his heart was still beating fast. The feeling was different this time. It wasn't the nervous, shaky kind of before. This was a steady, warm feeling, like he had done something he was proud of. The applause was loud, and the faces in the crowd were smiling. He didn't need to look at the judges. He knew they had been surprised. Backstage, he felt a rush of relief and happiness. He had faced the very thing that had scared him the most and came out stronger. His hands no longer trembled. His mind was clear, but he also knew this was just the beginning. The competition was tough. Many talented people were there. Some could sing, some could dance, and some played instruments as well as or better than he did. But he didn't compare himself to them. He only thought about how far he had come from that first audition where everything went wrong. As the days passed, the show's crew started to recognize him. Some of the other contestants who had heard about his comeback approached him with respect. They saw the quiet confidence in his eyes. He was no longer the nervous teenager who had stumbled before. He was someone who had learned from his mistakes and grown. The judges, too, were watching closely. One of them, who had been the harshest the previous year, kept asking questions about the new song he played. "Where did you learn that technique?" he asked during a break. The teenager smiled and said he had practiced every day for the last year. The judge nodded slowly, a new respect in his voice. The show moved forward, and each week brought a new challenge. Sometimes he had to play songs given by the producers. Other times he could choose his own. Each time he prepared carefully. He practiced late into the night. He worked on his stage presence, learning how to hold the microphone, how to move without losing focus. But it wasn't just about the music. He had also learned how to handle pressure. When he made a small mistake, he didn't freeze anymore. He kept playing, sometimes even smiling at the audience. The crowd loved that. They could see he was real. One night, after a particularly strong performance, the judges gave their feedback. This time it was full of praise. "You've come a long way," one judge said. "Your confidence and skill are impressive." Another said, "You've found your own voice. That's what matters most." Hearing those words made the teenager feel like all the hard work had been worth it. He had earned their respect, not by being perfect, but by never giving up. Outside of the competition, things were changing too. The video of his audition and comeback started to spread again, but this time it was different. People weren't laughing or mocking. They were inspired. Comments poured in, saying how his story gave hope to others who had failed. Some fans started following him on social media, sending messages of encouragement. It was overwhelming but also exciting. He replied to some, thanking them quietly. Still, with all this attention, he kept himself grounded. He remembered the quiet hours alone in his room, the struggle to find his confidence. He didn't want to lose that part of himself. He wanted to stay true. The weeks went on and the competition grew tougher. Each round meant more people were watching, more pressure and bigger stages. But the teenager didn't let the fear return. He used the nerves to fuel his passion. One week, the producers asked him to perform a fast, complicated song he had never played before. Many thought it would be too hard, but he saw it as a challenge. He practiced it over and over, breaking it down piece by piece until it felt natural. The night of the performance arrived. The bright lights, the cameras, the audience, and all of it was there. He stepped onto the stage, guitar in hand, and took a deep breath. The song started fast and furious. His fingers moved quickly, perfectly hitting every note. The crowd was on their feet by the end, cheering loudly. Even the judges were amazed. Afterward, the harshest judge came up to him backstage. "I have to admit, you surprised me," he said with a small smile. "You're not just a good player. You're a true musician." The teenager smiled back. Those words meant more than any prize. Behind the scenes, the other contestants came to see him differently too. Some asked for advice. Others just gave a nod of respect. The competition wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about sharing a love for music and learning from each other. As the final weeks approached, he felt a mix of excitement and calm. He had done things he never thought possible. The fear that once held him back had almost disappeared. The last challenge was the hardest. He had to write and perform a completely original song live on stage. The pressure was huge. This was his moment to show who he really was as an artist. He stayed up late writing, pouring all his feelings into the lyrics and melody. He thought about the journey, the failures, the lessons, the support from his family and grandfather, and the hope that never left him. When the night came, he stood under the spotlight, guitar ready. The music started slow, soft, and then built up with emotion. His voice was steady and his fingers moved with confidence. The audience was silent, hanging on every note. When the song ended, the room exploded in applause. The judges stood up clapping, some with tears in their eyes. He had done it. He had turned the pain of the past into something beautiful. The host announced that he was one of the finalists. He smiled, knowing this was more than a competition now. It was a story of hope, of courage, and the power of never giving up. The days after the final performance were filled with a mix of excitement and quiet reflection. The teenager knew the competition wasn't over yet. The next stage would be even harder, with more people watching and bigger expectations. But he felt ready. He thought back to all he had been through, the first painful audition, the harsh words from the judges, the fear and shame that followed, the lonely nights practicing in his room, the encouragement from his grandfather, the small steps that had brought him here. It was a long journey, and he was proud to have made it this far. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was different now. The other contestants, once strangers, had become friends. They shared stories of struggles and dreams. They laughed together and supported one another. Even though they were all competing, there was respect and kindness. The teenager realized this was more than a contest. It was a community of people who loved music and believed in its power. The final week arrived. The show was set to be broadcast live, and the pressure was intense. The teenager spent hours preparing. He worked with coaches on his voice, his guitar, and his stage presence. He practiced speaking to the audience, sharing the story behind his songs. He knew this was his chance to connect with people, not just show his skill. One evening, as he practiced late into the night, his parents came to check on him. They saw the determination in his eyes and felt proud. They told him how much they believed in him, not just because of his talent, but because of his courage to keep going. The night of the final arrived quickly. Backstage, the lights were bright and the energy was electric. Cameras moved around, capturing every moment. The teenager felt the familiar rush of nerves, but also a calm confidence. When it was his turn, he walked onto the stage with a steady step. The crowd cheered and the judges smiled. He held his guitar and looked out at the sea of faces. This time, he wasn't just playing for the judges or the competition. He was playing for everyone who had ever felt small or scared, for those who had been laughed at or told they weren't good enough, for anyone who had a dream. The song began softly. His voice was clear, full of emotion. The melody grew stronger, rising and falling like the waves of the ocean. His fingers moved smoothly over the strings. The music told a story, his story, of falling, learning, and rising again. The audience listened in silence, some with tears in their eyes. The judges watched with respect and admiration. When the last note faded, the room erupted in applause. The teenager smiled, feeling a joy he had never known before. The host came on stage and announced the winner of the competition. When the teenager's name was called, he felt a wave of happiness and disbelief. He had done it. Against all odds, he had won. As he stood on the stage holding the trophy, he thought about the journey, about the moments of doubt and pain and the moments of hope and courage, about the people who had believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. After the show, many people reached out to congratulate him. Messages poured in from around the world. Some said they were inspired by his story. Others said his music had touched their hearts. The teenager knew this was just the beginning. The real work was still ahead. But now he had a new belief, that failure was not the end, but a step on the path to success. He continued to write music, to play, and to share his story. He wanted to help others who felt afraid or alone. He wanted to show that with hard work and heart, anything was possible. Looking back, he realized that being mocked and doubted had made him stronger. It had taught him to keep going no matter what, and that was the greatest victory of all. Winning the competition changed everything. Suddenly, the teenager was no longer invisible. People recognized him on the streets. Strangers stopped him to say how much they liked his music or how his story had inspired them. It was a strange feeling, both exciting and overwhelming, but with this new attention came new challenges. The pressure to keep performing well was high. Every time he picked up his guitar, he felt eyes watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. Sometimes the nerves crept back, whispering doubts in his ear. What if he wasn't as good as people said? What if this was just a lucky moment? He knew these thoughts were natural, but they could be dangerous if he let them take over. So he found ways to stay grounded. He still played for himself first, not for the crowd or the praise. He wrote songs late at night when no one was around, pouring his true feelings into every word and note. His family remained his biggest support. They reminded him to take breaks, to rest, and to enjoy the journey. They celebrated every small success and helped him through the hard days. One day he was invited to perform at a charity event. It was a chance to use his music for something bigger than himself. He agreed without hesitation. Standing on that stage with a crowd that had gathered to support a good cause, he felt a deep sense of purpose. His music was no longer just about proving himself. It was about giving back. The performance went beautifully. Afterward, people came up to thank him, sharing their own stories of struggle and hope. It was a moment that touched his heart deeply. He realized that music had the power to connect people, to heal, and to inspire. As his popularity grew, so did the opportunities. He was invited to record his own album. The process was exciting but also challenging. It required long hours in the studio, learning new skills and working with others. There were times when he felt tired and unsure. But he kept pushing forward, remembering why he started. He also faced criticism. Not everyone was kind. Some people online said he wasn't talented enough or that his success was just a fluke. At first, these words hurt deeply. But over time, he learned not to let negativity control him. He focused on the positive, on the people who believed in him, and on the music that made him happy. The teenager also began to think about the future. He wanted to help others like himself. young people who had dreams but were afraid to chase them. He started visiting schools, sharing his story, and playing music for students. His message was clear: don't let failure stop you. Keep working, keep believing, and never give up. These visits were rewarding. He saw the hope in the eyes of the kids, the way some of them started to pick up instruments for the first time. It reminded him of his own journey, the long hours of practice, and the moment his grandfather handed him the guitar again. One afternoon, while visiting a school, a young girl approached him shyly. She told him she had been bullied because she loved to sing, but others laughed at her. The teenager smiled gently and said, "I know what that feels like, but your voice is special. Keep singing no matter what." That simple conversation stayed with him. It was a reminder that his music was not just about himself. It was about touching lives and giving courage. Over time, he became more than just a musician. He became a symbol of hope for many. His story was shared on social media, in newspapers, and on TV. People saw him as proof that failure could lead to success if you never gave up. Despite the fame and success, he stayed humble. He knew he still had a lot to learn. He kept practicing, exploring new styles of music, and writing songs that spoke from the heart. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, he sat quietly with his guitar. He thought about how far he had come, from being mocked on a stage to standing in front of thousands of people cheering for him. It was a journey filled with pain and joy, doubt and hope. He smiled softly and began to play a new song. It was a song about the power of believing in yourself, about rising after falling, and about the music that never lets go. And as the notes filled the room, he knew that his story was still being written, one song at a time.